Hi everyone, and welcome to Therapy Unfiltered. I'm Joe Valder, clinical counselor here, counseling services at Johnson & Wales University. On this show, we take the mystery out of mental health and help you understand what it's really like to sit on the couch. It's time to take a deep breath and dive in. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the very exciting second episode with Jocelyn Thommen. Now, as some of you may recall, that previously we were talking about, various substance use challenges and challenges related to substance misuse and associated type experiences. But I thought it'd be good to have Jocelyn on once again to talk a bit more about potential challenges related to substance use, to talk about the idea of harm reduction, and to also talk about various resources and community resources that are available. But before we do that, thought it'd also be good just to introduce Jocelyn once again, a fellow clinical counselor here at Johnson & Wales, and ask her a very important question about winter. So, Jocelyn, before we get started with talking about substances and whatnot, can you introduce yourself and also just tell us your favorite part about winter?
Hey, Joe. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really happy to be here. Winter is actually my second favorite season. And I think one of the reasons why I like it so much is I love the cold. Like, I love when you walk outside and you take that breath of fresh air. It just feels so fresh. I'm used to growing up somewhere where there was much more open space and it wasn't really in a city. So even when I'm in the city, down city here, I feel like I can take a deep breath and it just feels crisp.
Yeah, I agree. I love that about the winter as well. And I love the winter. I love the cold. I love wearing sweatshirts and whatnot and eating stews. But it's interesting, a change I've experienced recently, and this is perhaps one drawback of the podcast setting, is that folks can't see us, but if they could, they would know that I have no hair on my head, as I, have no longer that's a part of my life.
This is a recent new hairstyle for you.
It is, and what I've discovered is there's a significant change in how I feel in terms of temperature. I feel cold much more often now.
Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I know I've heard that as a thing in terms of losing heat through your head, but it is certainly real when you shave off all your hair.
Well, luckily for you, before the semester ended, I was in the bookstore, and there were some beautiful Johnson & Wales hats for sale.
Cool. We'll have to check that out. Thanks, Jocelyn, and good to have you back. And I thought a good place to start would be with this idea again of, harm reduction. Perhaps you can tell us what that means and how it applies to substance use.
Yeah, thank you. Harm reduction is one of my favorite interventions to use, whether it's dealing with substance use or decision making. Lots of times students come to our counseling center to talk about academics and that kind of stress or confrontation with roommates. And the idea that we can make a risky or uncomfortable decision for us in a safer way is one of my favorite techniques to go about change.
Yeah, certainly. And I've always conceptualized it as sort of, I guess not the counter, but sort of a distinct idea from like the idea of abstinence, right? It's sort of like harm reduction and then abstinence. Those are the two things.
Exactly. So for people who don't know, abstinence is all or nothing. It really means 0%. There's absolutely no way that this is allowed and let's stay away from it. And kind of the notion that if we don't talk about it, if we don't do it, if we don't explore it, then it can't hurt us. And what research shows, and history has repeated itself over and over again. Like you think about the Prohibition during the 1920s, and the government said, absolutely no alcohol. And then there were bootleggers, and there were the Roaring Twenties and speakeasies. A lot of increased crime rate because people could not safely and casually purchase and use alcohol. And then we think about Richard Nixon's idea of the war against drugs. And that was another abstinent-based intervention where there was the idea that all drugs are terrible and nobody can use any sort of drugs at all, minus alcohol. But there was the idea of having a lot of restrictions around that still. And what we've learned is that when people say no drugs, no sex, no alcohol, people are going to do these things anyway. They're all vices, and as human beings, we're all curious and we deal with stress. And when we think about the college campus, this is a first time for a lot of people to explore these new options and activities without much guidance. So harm reduction on our campus can be seen in ways like if you're going to go to a party and you know that there's alcohol there, what do you think you could do to make it a safer experience for you, Joe?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good thing to think about is, not going alone and whatnot, and, perhaps eating a big meal before you go, or,
Right.
Asking a friend to check in with you on your phone, things like that. Those are the type of things you're thinking about, Jocelyn?
Absolutely. So some of the most casual and common harm reduction techniques are things like eating a meal before you go drinking. Like you said, that's just chemistry. We're just trying to keep each other and ourselves safe. Having a designated driver. If you're going to go off campus to a party and there's going to be alcohol or other substances there and you're not able to drive, please don't get behind the wheel. The safest option is to have a designated driver or use an Uber. Even with marijuana, I know a lot of people think that there's not as much of a problem with using marijuana before getting behind the wheel of a car. But just like with alcohol, if you're impaired by anything, whether it's marijuana, a stimulant, even being overtired, if you're unsafe behind the wheel of a car, you are going to get in trouble.
Yeah, certainly. And just makes me think, too, as we're talking about harm reduction here, just noteworthy that it can be a bit of a controversial topic, I would say, among certain folks, And I think it's also noteworthy to say, too, that, although obviously, as we've said before, the answer is not just abstinence for everything for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. But it's noteworthy to say, too, that for some people, that is the thing that works. So I wouldn't want to suggest that, abstinence is never a thing that is good, of course, because obviously, as you are aware of as well, Jocelyn, for some folks, abstinence is the thing they do, and that's the thing that works.
Absolutely. And that is a whole other section of this conversation that I agree with you, we should get into. Because abstinence is important for some people when they cannot tolerate a substance or a vice or a behavior, and it makes their life worse. I think we talked about that a bit in the first episode, where when we notice things like your grades are slipping and you're losing relationships, your overall well-being is being negatively impacted by your drug or vice behavior of choice, then perhaps abstinence is the best plan for you.
Yeah, certainly. And as with a lot of things, it's not, you can't say it's a one-size-fits-all with everybody, right? It's very experience-specific and person-specific and all that.
Absolutely. And that is when I would recommend to, as a broad recommendation, to come in and talk to us about what you think might be the best plan for you, whether it is abstinence or harm reduction. But switching back to the harm reduction piece, one of my favorite interventions that we did, or I guess programs we did at a university that I was interning at, when it had to do with drinking in a more safe college environment, was we were actually given ping pong balls that were glow in the dark so we could see them easily, and we were encouraged to bring them to any party. And some drinking games they involve using a ping pong ball, and something like that might be known as beer pong. So we were encouraged to document beer pong games and follow the ping pong ball. So if someone was at a party and playing beer pong, and the ping pong ball rolls under the table or it goes under the stove, and we were encouraged to take pictures of it to see all of the dust and the germs and the hair and whatever other yucky things came onto it, how can we make going to a party and engaging in beer pong safer? Use a water cup. So that's the difference, one of the biggest differences between abstinence and harm reduction is we're making these risky decisions by potentially risky decisions by engaging in something like beer pong or another drinking activity. But let's do it safer. Let's try to limit our exposure to germs and mud and whatever's on the floor from the bottom of our shoes. Let's keep it safe.
Yeah, certainly. It's a great point, Jocelyn. It's not about pretending that these things don't happen, and pretending that games involving ping pong balls don't occur.
Right.
It's more about, how to make these things more safe and, less problematic.
Right. I think a more serious harm reduction intervention and something that we should not assume does not happen in the Providence community is that sometimes people are using intravenous drugs. And there is a huge opioid pandemic happening nationwide right now. And what we've found is that sometimes people are at a larger risk because they don't have access to the supplies that they need to continue to be addicted to the substance that they're using safely. So you can, if this is something that impacts you or a loved one, intravenous drug use, I encourage you to check out the website Prevent Overdose Rhode Island. And Prevent Overdose Rhode Island provides information and resources around Rhode Island's opioid epidemic. And they provide treatment, overdose prevention, and can inform you where to receive naloxone and how to administer it. Joe, are you familiar with naloxone or Narcan?
I am familiar, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you know about it?
Well, I know that it, can be a life-saving intervention.
Yeah, so exactly. So naloxone is for the people, our listeners who don't know, naloxone is a medication that you can get for free through different agencies, or you can get it prescribed by a doctor if you live with a loved one or you yourself are struggling with opioids that you can overdose on, including fentanyl. And if you are around somebody who is experiencing this overdose, then it can be administered through the nose and it immediately blocks the high and the overdose. And as soon as it's administered, you call 911 and then your loved one can receive the treatment that they need.
Yeah, certainly, and it's a good thing to bring up, Jocelyn, there, and especially the 911 part, because related to that, there's often trainings, right, with naloxone and what to do and how to know when to administer it, and obviously one of the big ones there is to always call 911 afterwards.
Absolutely. And on the Prevent Overdose Rhode Island website, you can find out where to not only receive the naloxone, but receive the training. Nobody is going to give you this medication without being able to use it. So that's something that I encourage everybody to do if they've got the time or the interest.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jocelyn. And makes me think, too, just in general about, community supports and resources. I didn't know if you had more to say about harm reduction, but I was going to, perhaps suggest, too, that we talk a bit more about, community supports.
Yeah, so that segues exactly to the next topic that I wanted to talk about, which is right on Broad Street in Providence, so right near the Down City campus, is another resource called Project Weber Renew. And something that I love about Project Weber is that this organization provides peer-led harm reduction and recovery support services to people of all sexes and genders, and just really anyone who engages in drug use and or sex work to make healthier and safer choices in their own lives. Again, this is something that it's important for us to acknowledge happens in the community that we live in. Just because we don't think about it, we don't talk about it, doesn't mean it's not happening. So the more information, the more we talk about it, the safer we can make our community. Project Weber, they provide Narcan and naloxone, those drugs that we just spoke about, needle exchange, fentanyl test strips, recovery support, HIV and hepatitis C testing and care, sexual health services, and case management. So if you are feeling like your life is getting out of control, or if you notice that a loved one is getting out of control because of their substance use or something like their sexual activities or gambling or any other kind of behavioral addiction, they can go to some place like Project Weber right on Broad Street and get support to either start to make the changes or make their risky behaviors feel safer for themselves and the community.
Yeah, great resource to have. And, just in general, too, thinking about that decision to reach out to such Project Weber, right?
Yeah.
If you ever feel unsure about it, if you're ever not, in general, feel unsure or uncertain, again, feel free to come in, second floor Wales Hall. You can check in with us, we can talk about a situation, even if it's not you directly, even if you're concerned for another person.
Sure.
And their substance use, you can come in and talk to us about that.
Absolutely. And I am not the gatekeeper. I'm not the only one with these resources. So if somebody wants to come in and learn more about these resources, every clinician at Johnson & Wales has access to these, and we can provide a whole list of services of different levels of care and different specialties for someone who is trying to manage their substance use, make it safer, totally abstain from it, or find out more information about a loved one that they see struggling.
Certainly, and we can, and substance use specialists too, substance use counselors, that's another thing we can help folks find in the community too. Should their insurance allow it, another area we can help with referrals, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Cool. Did you have any other community-based resources, Jocelyn?
Yes, so I have got a ton.
Oh, my goodness.
But I'm not going to go over all of those. I think the big ones for me to mention today, these are more actually global organizations. Many people have heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. Joe, have you heard of Alcoholics Anonymous?
I have, yes, also known as AA, of course, and not the battery.
That is correct. It's not AA, it's AA. And that is, for our listeners who don't know, that is an organization that has different specialties and groups, and it's available online and in person for all walks of life who are trying to abstain from alcohol and stay sober. So many people have heard of AA, but I want to point out that even in our area, there are Gamblers Anonymous meetings, Marijuana Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, and also Al-Anon for people who are friends and family of a person who's struggling with addiction. Meetings happen, all of these meetings happen in the group setting, and especially when it's worldwide. You can find a meeting anytime, any day that is able to support you.
Yeah, and the group setting's huge, of course, too, because, that connection, that seeing as though you're not the only one, the idea of universality, other people have these experiences, it's a big thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, the group support is marked and studied for years and years as one of the most successful interventions for a more successful, healthy, managed substance use and maintaining abstinence for those who cannot use any substances safely.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jocelyn. Unless you had anything else to add, I think that's a great way to wrap up this double episode, piece.
Yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
Hey, sure thing. And remember, everybody, if you have more questions or if this podcast, provokes some sort of idea or thoughts or concerns that you have, feel free to come up and see us, and you can meet with any of us therapists up there on the second floor of Wales Hall. So everyone have a good day.
Bye.